Welcome to Season 2 of the Face to Face Ministries podcast. I am Melinda Wilson.
And I'm Kathy Little. Thank you so much for joining us as we introduce you to ministries and leaders from around the globe who have said yes to the Isaiah 61 mandate to heal the brokenhearted and set the captives free, helping people to step into who they were always meant to be.
And for more information about us, please visit our website, face2faceministries.org. That's all one word, no spaces, no numbers, and no caps. And please follow us on our social media platforms, face2faceministries.org on Facebook, and on Instagram, face2facemin.
Welcome to today's episode. We are so happy you're here. Hey, everybody.
Welcome to episode 84.
Episode 84. Keep trucking along. Actually, last time I think we were in Oregon when we recorded, and now we're in North Carolina.
Somewhere, yeah, because we actually stopped on the way back, and I took a photo of this old Airbnb, or this inn, in the middle of Chemult, Oregon.
Oh, that's
and
true.
we did our podcast in the bathroom.
We did our part of the podcast.
Our podcast,
we didn't
yes,
interview a guest
that's
in
right.
there.
But we will take it anywhere because we want to get this out. And so we're coming at you from a totally different location
We
today.
are actually in Hendersonville, North Carolina, and we are in the middle of an amazing thing that God is doing, and we won't give you a whole lot of info on that, but we've had the privilege of bringing together some key voices in heart healing, and most of them we have interviewed, with very few exception, but we're going to rectify that today because there's one lady who is sitting with us right now that we have just met and who is in that category, in that circle of healers. And we're very excited about what God is doing by bringing these voices together. The podcast was just the beginning of a much bigger thing that God was doing. And we're starting to see how much bigger that is. And I'm honestly quite gobsmacked, as they would say in the UK.
That means
watching God.
Open mouth and slap hand over it. So the gob is the mouth, and then you say gobsmack. Like, oh my gosh.
Amazing. But we're very excited to be really in the middle of the vortex of what God is doing to bring healing and transformation to the earth.
And just to remind you of our Face-to-Face Ministries Heart Healing Network, if you haven't signed on there, we're welcoming new members every day. We would love to have you a part of it. We're building a community of, we're raising up an army of heart healers with healed hearts. So if you have any interest or even inkling of learning about heart healing, or you don't know where to start, join us, and we're doing training and mentoring, building community together.
Yes, very excited about that. And we don't want to delay anymore. We're going to bring to you our special guest, which is Yvonne Martinez. And tell us about her.
Well, I'm gonna let I think people do a better autobiography of themselves.
That's probably
and
true.
because we only met 2 days ago, I cannot tell her whole life story. But hearing a little bit,
actually, we're kind of we're not in our normal place to record. And so I'm actually going to step out and let Melinda do most of the interview here because we only have the two mics with us right now. And I'll catch you guys on the other side of this, but I am so excited.
I'm sure
to hear
they'll
from
miss
Yvonne.
you though, Kathy.
I know you guys will miss me to pieces. I know, but that's okay. I might grab the mic in the middle. Who knows? But
she probably will, folks.
Okay. Well, here is Yvonne Martinez.
Yvonne, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
And it's just so fun to meet someone new. There are so many people that aren't as necessarily quote unquote famous or well known, but are just as anointed, just as called, just as gifted. And Yvonne, I'm surprised you're not famous because of the amount of books you've written.
Oh my goodness.
And she kept naming off all these books. We were meeting last night. I was like, wow. So Yvonne, would you just introduce yourself and who you are and what you do? I know somewhat, but I'm just going to let you do it because you're going to introduce yourself a whole lot better than I would do.
Well, let's see. So I got saved in 1977. And from that point on, my life completely changed and turned around. So today, at my age, which I know is a secret for us that are a little bit older, I am sort of living my dream that I am who I wanted to be when I was younger. Would be somebody who had something to give to other people. And I had no idea that the first time I shared my testimony, there were 120 women in the room. I was back in the Aglow days of Women Aglow, and all those mamas that were there took me under their wing, and they really tutored me in the gifts of the Holy Spirit. So I started out really early after receiving the Lord into my life to have spiritual women around me that kind of mentored me in that way. And so the first time I shared my testimony, I was mostly in the bathroom about ready to throw up because I was so nervous about having to come out and talk in front of anybody. But I shared my testimony, which was at that point was about 95% pain and about 5% healing. But I shared my testimony and what the Lord had done, and I closed my eyes and I said, if anybody wanted to receive the Lord or wanted prayer, to please come forward. And 80 of those 120 women came forward. And not only was I surprised that I had something to give, but I really knew that the voice that the Lord tried to, that empowered, was the voice that the enemy tried to stop. And I knew that my voice had power. And so it was from that point on I was really encouraged and grew. I wrote my first book in 1994, and it was called Victim to Victor, and it was pretty much my testimony and then the steps that the Lord walked me through. Because I knew for this to be valuable, it wasn't just for me, but there were so many other women behind me that really needed to know how they were going to get help and healed from the kind of past that I had as well.
Well, tell us, I love what you said, that your testimony used to be 95% pain and 5%, the glory story. And that, I think that some of us, when we're first learning how to I think it's kind of a skill sometimes, and we focus on so much of the pain, and yet really what we want to focus on is the glory part of it. And but I think that our listeners are enough curious now to hear just a little bit of your story. But yeah, because you did share it the other night, and it was wow. So please give our listeners the honor of hearing some of your story.
All right. So I grew up in a crazy alcoholic home. My mom actually married my dad twice. I think it might be 3 times, but she might have kept that a secret, my birth dad. But she married my birth dad, and he was basically a womanizer and a gambler, and ended up in San Quentin prison for attempted murder. So my mom, I grew up in this alcoholic, violent, domestic violent home. And so finally when my mom got free from that, she turned her life around. She stopped drinking, went through AA, and really celebrated, an experience with the Lord. But me growing up out of that, I had no idea who I was, and I only felt complete when I had some sort of a relationship that was a substitute for real intimacy. So I got married when I was 18. By the time I was 20, he had left the relationship. I got married again. I married a man that we were married 2 months and 13 days, and he was killed in an accident. I married again, and I became the wife in a domestic violent relationship. It was sometime after that that I was violently raped and held at gunpoint in a store that I owned. And then shortly after that, I was diagnosed with cancer and 5 years to live. So by the time I was 26 years old, I had felt like I had lived a whole life. And so I was pretty much had accepted my death sentence, feeling like that was going to be my way out of this painful world that I lived in. And so, I was still looking for another person in my life, and I happened to meet Yvonne Martinez. And Tony was a Christian. And I always say he knew that I was more than he could be able to help, so he had to lead me to the Lord. So this was in now, I had my diagnosis, I think, around 1976. 1977 or so, I became a Christian, and in 1979, Tony and I married. And we have been married 42 years. So out of the cancer, I wasn't able to have any more children, and we adopted 3 children. And it was about 20 years after my diagnosis, and then going to the doctor every year, every 6 months for a while, then every year for a while. finally they said, "Why are you still coming in to be checked?" And I said, "Because I was told I had to keep being checked." And then I realized that the Lord had healed me. And I'm 42 years, almost 45 years, cancer-free. And when I realized that, I absolutely knew the power of the Lord, that there was a destiny for me that I just couldn't see when I was growing up. So and I had already, after I became a Christian, already started in ministry. I had said I had shared my testimony and started doing groups, survivor groups, working with women, went on staff at our church as a counselor, which was amazing to me, that I had not only my own life that I felt rewarded by having this victory, but that it really was that I had something to share with others. So I wrote my first book in 1994. It was called From Victim to Victor, and worked with different ministries to help bring recovery into the church. I became a part of an affiliation of Christians in Recovery, and so we spoke throughout Southern California, helping people to be aware of the need for recovery. And my part in that was to help put together support groups for victims. And I didn't realize at the time that there's actually 4 stages in that growth, in that the first is a victim, the second is the survivor, the third is the overcomer, and the fourth is the new life. And that the victim, the survivor, and the overcomer are still attached in some way to what happened to them, but I'm definitely in that stage of new life. And my slogan now is that your experience isn't your identity and your history isn't your destiny. That what happened to you isn't who you are. So I went on then in those years in the 80s to continue in ministry. 94, I wrote my first book. And then in 96, we received our minister's certificate from the church that we were in, our ordination. And we headed off to Alaska for 4 years in missions. And it was during that time I just developed more skills and so forth. And then when revival had hit and we ended up moving out of that particular area just for financial reasons, and it was about that time we were really seeking for a greater experience with the Lord. Like we had been praying for revival, but we weren't really seeing that manifest in some ways. So we decided that we would try out Bethel Church in Redding, California, and it absolutely changed both of our lives. And so for me, it gave me this sense of really understanding the fullness of the Holy Spirit. And I always laugh and say, well, I saw more people healed through laughter than I did through tears about that point. And I was prayed for a gift of writing. Sean Bolts came through our area and said, who wants to write more? I wanted to write more books. And so since that time, I've written, so I had one book, I've written 23 books, and then we decided, so I work for Bethel now for Trenton Transformation Center, and we wanted to expand services, so I applied to get my drug and alcohol credentials and was able to get a high enough certification that I could teach. So I opened a school of education in the state of California, so it's called CARE, C-A-R-E, Center for Advanced Recovery Education, and we have students online now all over California, Oregon, and Alaska. But during that time at working with Bethel and continuing to work with victims and survivors and overcomers, I really learned more about inner healing. And so I guess the name of our nonprofit is I Am Brave International. So we teach not only drug and alcohol curriculum, which is more secular because that's what you have to learn in order to get any credential, but began training more in the area of trauma. Wrote lots of, most of my books are written about recovery, written about how not only can you help yourself to get better, but how you can help others too. A lot of books on training, so I became a trauma-informed trainer. I have contracts within our county for professional education. I worked also part-time at our domestic violence shelter and worked with our sexual assault survivors and victims of trafficking. Part of our Northern California Anti-Trafficking Coalition now that does prevention and intervention warning signs for trafficking. Then I wrote the 201 curriculum, which is the things that you need to know when you're working with victims of trafficking and how to really help them in a trauma-informed way to be able to gain some sense of trust and stability so that they can actually begin a new life. So I think I have my hands in lots of different pots right now, which I absolutely love. Somebody asked me one time, what's the hardest thing about your job? And I said, the hardest thing about my job is managing my yeses.
So, wow, a lot of questions are popping up in my mind right now. And of course, Kathy, feel free to grab the mic. I was joking when I said she probably will, because we really make a great team. But just a couple questions. Well, I'll just start with one. Well, let me try to nail it down to, you can only answer one at a time. But something you said kind of at the beginning, you said that you realized that the enemy was trying to take your voice from a very early age. So, and I because I've done enough ministry and over the years and have actually heard people say that, or I've felt that, it's been very obvious, like, wow, the enemies, and maybe I didn't even say it to them, but the enemies tried to take their voice. Can we just unpack that a little bit, Yvonne? Just maybe your own experience, and then talk to people who can relate, and maybe they're at a place right now that they feel someone has taken my voice, or I know that I'm supposed to speak, but she's already written 25 books, but I'm still here at victim. So can we back up a little bit to speak to someone who feels like, oh, I know I have a voice, but it's so far down. How do I get to it?
Well, I think the believing in the Lord to empower you is really important, but the part of healing is beginning to believe in yourself and beginning to believe that you're worthy of community, you're worthy of being loved. One of the main things that I learned is that we don't work for love, we work from love. And so when you feel loved and you feel connected, you feel like you have something to give. And for so many women that I've worked with, they have actually the very strength that they have to be lovers and to be connected and to be in a marriage where there's this reciprocity of giving and receiving gets wounded early on, and so they find themselves giving and not really getting anything back. And I think even for me, all of my strengths were used against me. So my strength of responsibility was really well taken care of, well taken advantage of, in a home where I was the oldest child. And so I think when we look at our voice and we look at who we are, it's not about what we need to tell other people sometimes. It's about what we need to tell ourselves. And the idea of being able to forgive other people is important, but the learning to forgive ourselves and the learning that that we were created in the image of God to have a place, not just to be used or abused, but to actually have our voice and our choice. And it takes a lot of courage, and that's why we named our nonprofit ministry I Am Brave, because the bravest thing that you can do is to begin to stand up for yourself. And it's sometimes hard to do, but that's why having a community of people around you that will support you in that is important, to have that that connection that you don't have to do this by yourself.
What's the first step out of, again, speaking to perhaps someone out there that is in the midst of maybe an abusive relationship or a toxic relationship or a situation they feel helpless in? And especially right now with COVID, people are isolated. What can someone do as a first step to help themselves even find their voice?
Well, I think it does. Community is really important, and just having one person that you can trust, that you can reach out to, that then there's two of you. Finding another person, then there's three of you. Sometimes people really connect in their wounding, and they find other people that have been hurt in the same way. But you need somebody who's a step ahead of you. You need somebody who that you can trust, that you could feel can actually give you some direction. Most people that I know that really want help just don't know that first step. And so sometimes that first step is talking to somebody that you trust. It could be somebody at your church. It could be a women's support group. It could be calling into a show like this where you actually could talk to the host and actually get a referral list of where you could get help. It is difficult in trauma and addiction to break free without support and without help. There's so much isolation. And with COVID, we've had almost a 50 or higher % increase in domestic violence and child abuse just because people are under a lot of stress financially, as well as just, being isolated in environments where that aren't safe.
What have you seen give you, or what's given you the biggest hope, even in the midst of this? We could talk all day about tragic stories, and I'm sure, again, people listening might be saying, I'm one of those. Share with us some hope that you've seen over, even in 2020, stories of breakthrough or transformation that looked impossible when you first maybe encountered them.
We serve the God that makes all things possible. And I think hope is like a helium balloon, that we sometimes it's just right in front of us and sometimes it's far off. But, the scripture says that hope deferred makes the heart sick. And our bodies will get sick when there's not hope. And trauma is displayed in our body. I will say our body is the scene of the crime. And so when we have hope, which might be a friend that can give you a word of encouragement, or you call into a show like this, or to a broadcast somewhere where you can actually extend your hand out and have somebody else take you by the hand. And sometimes we have to stay present in the moment by actually finding the place inside of us where the Lord dwells, that we can connect in that really deep place inside of us, because nobody else has a bigger God than that's in you. The Holy Spirit is the same size as everyone. And so sometimes it's just looking inside your heart and finding that place in there where peace dwells, because it's hard to make good decisions when your mind is really busy with all of the chaos that goes on. So sometimes we say, well, circumstances are what circles around our stance. So we have to come inside and find the place in you where there's peace, so that you can actually think more clearly to make better choices. That if we focus on the circumstance, then we will make ourselves dizzy with what's circling around us that tries to distract us from what we need to do for ourselves. And the main thing is that all trauma breaches safety. And when our body does not feel safe, we're not going to be able to make good decisions. And so I would say, where's your place of safety? Who do you know that you could talk to? Where's that place that you can go? Maybe it's outside looking at the stars at night. It could be something very simple. Find a beautiful color that you like, and you focus on that color, and you let your body begin to relax, so that your mind and the spirit in you can connect with the peace of the Lord.
That's good. And I mean, I love what you're saying, because we've interviewed many people that have actual physical steps. We can talk philosophically about these things, or say, just trust in God, and it really doesn't help at all when someone's in a panic state, or as the brain scientists say, we're in the fear center, the survival center, where we either want to fight or flee or freeze, and having actual practical steps. And so I love that you're giving some of those practical steps. And obviously you have a lot of experience in recovering, healing from trauma. And so maybe it's just, wow, I love the thought of focusing on a color, or even just being aware of I'm present in my body, and just taking a moment and, okay, how's my body feeling? Sitting, grounding yourself in that place physically, so that you can even make a decision. Like when you're saying, when you're in a place of panic, you can't make a sound decision, can you?
So I've worked with a lot of people that were preparing to go to court, for example, and we'll go outside and take a walk and pick up just a really small little rock that they can hold in their hand, so that when they're giving their testimony, that when they're actually sharing with a policeman or anything about, or even just sharing with a friend, that they have a place that they can actually focus on, that helps them to stay present. So this whole idea of mindfulness sounds like maybe a crazy New Age thing, but it actually is coming back to the source that we can actually help our body to stay safe. Because when our body isn't safe, then our mind is going to begin to go crazy, and then we have the behavior that comes out. So until we come back and learn to manage our body, that we're the most powerful when we can self-manage. And so much of in victimization and being wounded, we've given other people power over us, and we feel like they're more powerful. But actually, a lot of what I do is to help people to find that place in them that the Holy Spirit dwells, that they can focus on that, and then to begin to build from that place out. And so part of having your voice is being able to actually say the things that you need to say. I say sickness is secrets and openness is wholeness. And when we get it out of the darkness and we bring it into the light, it's why it took me so long to write my testimony. I was so afraid that people would judge me about what happened to me until I began to talk a little bit about it, then a little more about it, then a little more about it. And most of the time now, I don't even share my testimony. It's really not who I am anymore. Not that I ignored it. I actually processed it. I embraced it. I stayed present in the pain of walking through the losses. And trauma is because there's loss in there. Until we can access the losses and we can see the consequences of that, and we can learn that if we don't learn to go with it, we become controlling. And when we try to control, then we become our life becomes unmanageable, because it's in trying to control the things that are unmanageable that creates that whole addictive cycle.
Wow, that's a mic drop statement there. I'm like, okay, I had another question, and then you said something else. I was like, wow. And oh my gosh, that was good. I'm so glad you talked about how trauma affects our body. We had a guest, Craig Miller, talk about how trauma, unprocessed pain can cause illness. And I think that's scriptural, isn't it? That there's some scriptures around, like envy rots the bones, I've heard. And there's other scripture that even talks about that. So you're not making this stuff up, Yvonne, that this is not hooey-gooey New Age stuff.
Well, I think when we look at, a lot of people come in to see me when they're in their 40s or their 50s. So the Lord lets us try to protect ourselves as much as we can until it doesn't work anymore. And then, they come knocking at our door looking for help. And so what we try to do then is to help them identify, I kind of skipped up there a little bit. When people come in because they finally realize that they have an illness, or they have an autoimmune disorder, or they have even the statistics about cancer, that girls that are molested are 6 times more likely to get cancer. And I was that statistic, but my statistic turned into a testimony, right? So I beat that statistic because I was I needed help so bad. I was desperate enough to risk trusting somebody with my story and what I needed. So a lot of times we don't get help until actually our bodies begin to warn us that something's not quite right. And so our body will talk for us when we don't have the words to say what we need to say. So helping people to say the words, helping people to have the courage, and us to have the patience to hear their own voice, be able to articulate what happened to them. One of the things that I have found, that so much of our abuse or trauma happened where there was no witness to the crime. And so the body has to talk. The symptoms are the reflection of the unheard voice. And so one of the gifts I have is to be able to find the voice that find the place that never had a voice, and give it the ability to articulate, so that the body doesn't have to speak for them. The symptoms are only the recollection of what wasn't heard inside of them. And so by giving people that opportunity to have their voice, to have their choice, actually begins to empower them, that they can actually be in control of their lives, not to be controlling, but to make better decisions for themselves.
That is so powerful. And I feel like this conversation is going to empower some people.
I think so too.
That they don't have to stay voiceless, and they can. This is key. Is so important, Yvonne, and something you said a few minutes ago too about actually sitting with the pain and not being afraid of that, and that's how you got healing. Because we talk about from a brain science perspective that our brain actually has to. Pain actually has to go through a pain processing pathway in order for it to heal. Ignoring it, suppressing it, putting it under the rug, medicating it, having our coping mechanisms, whatever that is, addiction, workaholism, those last so long. And then, like you said, I'd heard years ago, we start seeing people come for inner healing in their 40s, 50s, because their coping mechanisms have broken down.
Right.
The masks, the facade, all of that, it's worn out, and I can't hold on to it anymore. But if we can be proactive and actually not wait until the body is screaming out, but actually face it now, as much as painful as it is, to talk to someone and go, I've never told anybody this. I remember years ago we were overseas and we were ministering to a lady in her 70s, and she was telling us, it was just Kathy and I ministering to the lady, and she said, I've never told anyone this, and she shared a history of sexual abuse, and she had carried that in her body and her spirit and mind for almost 70 years because of the fear. And but if we can encourage people like what you're doing, Yvonne, right now with your work, with this podcast, this conversation, share with someone so that it's not 30, 40 years down the track now starting to manifest in your body. But even if it is, it's not too late, is it?
No, it's not. So it's sort of like, if you something affects you, and how we use the term like, I just kept pushing it down and pushing it down and pushing it down. So sometimes we do that. Something happens to it and we actually push it down and we hold it in our gut. When we begin to open the door and the closet to what's going on, it will begin to come up and out, and we will feel the pain as it felt when it went in. But on this time, it's on its way out. And so we do re-experience oftentimes the pain, the neglect, the loss, the sorrow. That's what forgiveness does. That the things that we forgive are things that are irreplaceable or irreparable. But that's the model that Jesus gave, that we forgive and others go free. But that when we hold on to that, it's a death grip on pain until we learn that when we begin to let go, it's not just freedom for other people, but it's the freedom for us. And what I find the hardest that people can forgive, the hardest for them to forgive is forgiving themselves. It's much easier to forgive other people, but that punishing yourself for what you couldn't change is a big part of healing, and finding that place where you have judged yourself, that you've been angry at yourself, and begin that process of self-forgiveness is a type of self-acceptance, that you begin to love yourself first so that you can love other people, because you can't give away what you don't have.
That's so good. So let's wrap up with that. I know we could continue the conversation for a long time. Let's kind of land the plane with forgiving yourself, because I can relate to that. I think that from my own experience, and then again ministering to a lot of people, the forgiveness of self. So, Yvonne, do you have an example or a key of what is that? How do we do that? How do we forgive ourselves?
Okay, so I'm gonna walk you through really quickly how I would do self-forgiveness. So I want you to close your eyes just for a minute and put your hand out in front of you and ask the Lord to show you a photograph of a time in your life that you were really upset with yourself. And it shouldn't be really hard. It should be very easy, because you know those times in your life where you judged yourself, that you're so disappointed in yourself. So ask the Lord to give you a photo of yourself in your hand in front of you right now. And then with that photo in front of you, I want you to call yourself by name. And I'll use my name as an example. I want you to say your name like this. So, Yvonne. I forgive you for any way you made mistakes, for any way that you couldn't be what other people wanted you to be, for any way that you made bad decisions, for you times that you put yourself at risk. And I ask you to forgive me for all the times that I judged you, that I was offended against you, that I rejected you. I ask you to forgive me for treating you like other people treated you. And then, Jesus, would you come to me in that picture? Would you come to me in that moment and open up your arms and take me into your arms and let me know that you have forgiven me? And I know we've done this a little quickly, but I know some of you have been able to track with me. And then I want you to take that picture that's been forgiven, that the Lord has forgiven, and to bring that place back into your heart and let it live again. And I bless you with a sense of loving yourself, of knowing yourself, of believing in yourself, that you're not what happened to you, that you are built and made in His image, and you have the capacity to love, to give and receive love. And I bless you with that wholeness that you can have in knowing who you are and who you belong to.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. That was really, that was invaluable. That was a treasure. And the beautiful thing about a podcast is people can go and listen to it again. They can pause it. They can take longer. We didn't know this was not planned, y'all. But it was by the Holy Spirit. So I bless anyone who prayed that. I just thank you so much, Yvonne. And I was going to ask you, you've written a lot of books. So two more questions quickly. What's your favorite book? And then how can people reach you?
Oh gosh, my favorite book. Probably now, so many years later, my rewrite of my first book is called Dancing on the Graves of Your Past, and it was named after that Rita Springer song when she says, "I'm going to dance all over those graves." I thought, that's the name of the retitle of that. And I had a 10-year edition of that a few years ago. So Dancing on the Graves of Your Past, it has a book and a workbook. It tells a little more than any other book a little bit about my story, but just to draw the reader in, and then walks through the steps that the Lord brought me through. And the book is been around the country in support groups. It works really well in a support group setting. Our ministry is I Am Brave International. It'll take you to our website, and you'll see two different categories. So I have a category for trauma and treatment and recovery, and then another area of education. So it's Shasta Blue Sky, which is our treatment and therapy program, and then Care EDU, which is our education and training program.
Well, I encourage our listeners to check that out, because there's just a plethora of resource. And Yvonne, I wish we could have kept speaking, but maybe we'll do round 2 at some point, because you're a treasure trove, and I really appreciate your time here, Yvonne. Thank you so much.
So it's been so fun for me, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, I'm going to pop in here. I have been standing here watching this conversation go on, and I have been reacting, and nobody can see it. But I'm like, wow, what a gift. What an absolute gift this has been. And I really feel there's a lot of juice on it, as far as I really feel like this is going to be one of those episodes where as you listen, healing will come because of what Yvonne just led us through. So I'm very excited that we had the opportunity to not only meet her, but come to love her and know her, and going to stick her in the bag of friends forever here.
And I was sitting here thinking, I'm going to sit down because I just stood up. What a blessing it is to actually be sitting in person. We're not on Zoom. We're not on Squadcast. I was thinking that.
This is the very
We're making eye contact, and this is the first one.
This is the very first episode in season 2 that we have done in person, because we had 61 episodes. So we're 22 episodes into season 2, and it's the first time we've had the opportunity to sit in person just because of the nature of the.
And this is really prophetic too, because our very first sit down in person interview was Donna Da Silva, who you work with at the Bethel Transformation Center, and so now you are our first sit down in person. And just referring to that real quick, Yvonne, what do you do with that, the Bethel Transformation Center?
So I'm pastor on staff at Bethel Church, and I'm the ministries coordinator for Transformation Center. I've been on the team for 12 years and was director for a while, and we've all upgraded our titles now. And so Donna is the queen, but I'm still the head princess.
Well, that's a power duo right there. But
that's awesome. Well, we've enjoyed spending a few days with these ladies and a beautiful collection of healers this week. And so this episode is going to come out on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, Tuesday the 23rd of November, 2020. And since I have the mic, I'm just going to let everybody know that you have an opportunity to be part of something way bigger than you by participating in Giving Tuesday, which is coming up on December 1st. And Face to Face Ministries is a 501c3, and by your investment in what we're doing, you're enabling us to continue carrying out the mandate that we have been given to bind up the brokenhearted and bring healing to people and setting captives free, and keeping us on the podcast, keeping us doing that, and all of the other things that we are doing. You're going to help us and be part of raising up an army of heart healers with healed hearts, because that is the mission that we've been given. We're bringing the voices of heart healing together so that there can be a much broader reach, but we as a ministry on our own, we are doing our part and carrying out our piece of the pie to raise up healers. And so we invite you to check out the free face-to-face heart healing network, and there's also some resources in there, and we have a premium membership that's going to be loaded with value. Right now it's already being loaded because the videos from season 1 are starting to drop because nobody's seen those yet. But we would invite you to partner with us financially. It's the International Day of Generosity and Giving, and we invite you to be part of that. You can find out how to do that on our website. There's a little give tab up there. But thanks so much for being part of this amazing conversation today. Oh man.
Yeah. And let us know, give us, reach out to us. I love, Yvonne, that you even said, call into the show. We invite people to do that all the time. We love feedback, questions, comments,
5-star ratings and reviews.
Yes.
And,
and what this particular podcast meant to you, how God ministered to you. We'd love to hear, and we'll share that with Yvonne. And
yes, absolutely.
So thank you again so much, Yvonne, and thank you to our listeners. We really appreciate you in this spirit of Thanksgiving all year, though. We really, particularly right now, thank you so much for listening.
We do wish everybody a very happy Thanksgiving and just peace and joy during a very crazy year. And we just bless you guys. Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Face to Face Ministries podcast. And to be sure not to miss any future episodes, please subscribe.
And to help us get the word out, please share this podcast with your friends. Give us a 5-star rating and leave us a brief review. More content is coming your way.
Thank you so much for listening.